disciple of Christ. I will never leave him. He is the truth and the life. He's the strength in my weakness. I will shine till the whole world sees.
Hey, welcome to this week's sermon preview. I'm Pastor Lance here with Pastor Nick. We're going through our Be One, Make One series, Nick. And so tell us a little bit more of where we're going this week.
Yeah, so this week we are going to jump off of where we've been the last couple weeks, where we've been looking at what does it mean to be a disciple, what does it mean to be one, right? And so this week kind of our focus is going to be on this idea of the worship of a disciple.
Okay.
So let's clarify this. We'll clarify this on Sunday as well. So when we say the worship of a disciple, it's not us worshiping disciples. It's how does a disciple worship?
Yep.
Okay. So that's an important clarification, I think, because it can be a little bit misunderstood based on how we're wording it. So we want to clarify that. So we're looking at what is the worship of a disciple? What does that look like as we're worshiping God? And we're going to be looking at John chapter 4, verses 21 through 24. So just a couple short verses, but they're kind of jam-packed full of information that Jesus is giving us teaching about what worship is. So Lance, as we look at this, maybe we kind of zoom out on this whole idea of worship to begin with. If I were to ask you the question, what is worship, or how would you define worship? What would your answer be?
Yeah, so I mean, your first thought is, worship on Sunday, singing, praising God. But worship really can be anything that you do, that you're praising, honoring, and glorifying God in a certain way. So it's not just this typical Sunday morning playing music or singing. There's a lot more to worship than just
right.
that.
So to clarify, worship is more than music.
Yes.
Right. Worship is more. I mean, and we'll talk about this more on Sunday. But I mean, worship can be prayer. Worship can be receiving communion.
Yeah.
Worship can be the reading of the Word and the event of preaching. Like that can be a worship event, right? So like there's so many things within not only like what we do Sunday mornings, like that's all worship, but also in our everyday lives.
Exactly.
There are things that are considered worship. So to start with, we need to reorient our minds on what worship actually is, and that it isn't defined to this one thing in this one place, right? So that's kind of what the foundation that we have to lay as we look at this passage. So what we look at this passage, what we see is that Jesus is having almost this debate with the Samaritan woman. The verses before then, Jesus is having this exchange with the woman at the well, this Samaritan woman at the well, and they kind of get in this debate a little bit of like, where should somebody worship? Like, is it where the Samaritans worship or where the Jews worship? And what we know is Jesus doesn't actually really debate with her, but he ends up really explaining to her and enlightening her on what true worship actually looks like. And what he ends up saying is that true worshipers, those that are truly worshiping the Father, are those that worship in spirit and in truth.
Yep.
Okay. Now, this phrase, spirit and in truth, this is something that I think has been maybe been used in a confusing way in the church, to where somebody's like, well, we need to worship in spirit and in truth, but then there's never any explanation as to like what that actually means. And so the hope this week is to add some clarity to that, to explain what does it mean to worship in spirit and in truth, and to see how does that cause us to interact with each other in the church, with each other in our community, as we seek to be one and make one.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at. As you're preparing for this passage, John chapter 4, verses 21 through 24, I'd encourage you to actually go back and read the passage, basically all of chapter 4 before that, because that's the story of Jesus' interaction with the woman at the well, and it's helpful context in our passage for this week. But then maybe think about or answer the question, like, what is my understanding of the phrase to worship in spirit and in truth? And maybe just do some thinking into how have I understood that in the past, and maybe do some research into what does that look like? What do other people say it means to worship in spirit and in truth? So, okay, all right, looking forward to it. See you then.
I'm a disciple of Christ. I will never leave him. He my weakness. I will shine to